Now, a couple of weeks ago, as you know, I was in Kyiv. I saw residential buildings destroyed just days before. I met soldiers in the ICU recovering from really terrible burns. We are all working to end this war. But let's be absolutely clear. Peace will come through strength. And we must do all that we can to support Ukraine's defence. This is a war not just in Ukraine, but a war on Ukraine against those children and their futures. And that's why together we stand with them.
Keir Starmer's grand plan for NATO peacekeepers in Ukraine just went up in flames. How? Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov didn't just reject it, he torched it. In a jaw-dropping press conference, Lavrov made it crystal clear. Any foreign troops, NATO or otherwise, would be seen as a direct provocation. Starmer's diplomatic dreams reduced to ashes in seconds. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Starmer's grand vision for NATO peacekeepers in Ukraine seemed like a masterstroke of diplomacy. The Labour leader, confident in his foreign policy acumen, proposed deploying NATO troops to create a buffer zone between Ukrainian and Russian forces. It was a bold move, designed to position Starmer as a key player on the international stage.
Stabilising the front line, providing the kit and training that they need, and that's why this year the UK will give more military support to Ukraine than ever before. We know that he's worried about the state of the Russian economy. So I'm here to work with our European partners on keeping up the pressure. We need to see all allies stepping up, particularly in Europe. President Trump has threatened more sanctions on Russia, and it's clear that that's got Putin rattled.
But as the saying goes, the road to diplomatic disaster is paved with good intentions. As Starmer outlined his plan, skepticism from international observers began to grow. Foreign policy experts raised eyebrows at the audacity of the proposal. Dr. Anna Kowalczyk, a senior fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, didn't mince words. Starmer's plan demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the delicate balance in Eastern Europe. Deploying NATO troops to Ukraine would be seen as a direct provocation by Russia, potentially escalating the conflict rather than resolving it. This wasn't Starmer's first foray into foreign policy blunders. Remember his ill-fated attempt to negotiate with the Taliban in 2021? Or his tone-deaf comments about the Israel-Palestine conflict that managed to anger both sides? It seems our Keir has a knack for diplomatic gaffes that would make even Boris Johnson blush. But let's give credit where it's due. Starmer's confidence in his peacekeeping proposal was unwavering. He stood at the podium, chest puffed out like a peacock in mating season, declaring that his plan would bring stability to the region and showcase Britain's leadership on the world stage. One couldn't help but wonder if he actually believed his own hype, or if this was just another case of political posturing gone awry. As news of Starmer's proposal spread, the international community held its breath. How would Russia respond to this bold move?
Russian spy ships loitering off the British coast, a campaign of sabotage across Europe, cyber attacks, election interference, and attempted assassination. Because ultimately, alongside our military support, that is what will bring peace closer. And we must keep working together to bolster NATO, part of the forward land forces, helping to police our skies and patrol our seas. Our defence spending is, of course, 2.3% of GDP now, and we're working hard to set the path to 2.5.
Would they see it as an opportunity for de-escalation or a threat to their interests? The tension was palpable, like watching a toddler wobble towards a Ming vase. You know it's going to end badly, but you can't look away. And then came the moment of truth. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, never one to mince words, delivered a brutal rejection that left Starmer's diplomatic credibility in tatters. Mr. Starmer's proposal is not only unacceptable, but demonstrates a dangerous naivety in international affairs, Lavrov stated, his voice dripping with disdain. Perhaps the Labour leader should focus on his domestic issues rather than meddling in matters beyond his comprehension. While Starmer nursed his wounded pride, a seismic shift was occurring in global diplomacy that would render his NATO gaffe utterly insignificant. The world was about to witness a diplomatic breakthrough that no one saw coming, least of all the Labour leader. In a move that sent shockwaves through international political circles, the United States and Russia announced they had agreed to fully restore diplomatic ties and begin peace talks regarding Ukraine. This wasn't just a minor policy adjustment, it was a tectonic shift in the geopolitical landscape. The venue for these talks, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a location as unexpected as the news itself. But here's the kicker: Starmer, along with the rest of the UK and European leadership, was nowhere to be seen. The man who had so confidently positioned himself as a key player in post-war security guarantees for Ukraine was left watching from the sidelines, his irrelevance laid bare for all to see. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in a statement that seemed to turn years of foreign policy on its head, emphasised the need for normal diplomatic relations to facilitate peace talks. It was a dramatic departure from the previous administration's stance, leaving many to wonder what game was really being played here.
Now that's what I'll be discussing at the EU Council this evening. We want to deliver an ambitious UK-EU security partnership to bolster NATO, covering military technology and R&D. NATO first will be at the heart of our strategic defence review this year. Across Europe, we must shoulder more of the burden now, because it's our burden to carry. Improving the mobility of forces across Europe, protecting our critical infrastructure, and deepening our industrial collaboration to increase defence production.
The absence of European leaders from these crucial negotiations raised eyebrows and blood pressures across the continent. How could discussions about the future of Ukraine take place without the involvement of its closest neighbours and staunchest supporters? The answer, it seemed, was quite easily, and the implications were staggering. For Starmer, this development was nothing short of catastrophic. He had staked his political future on the UK, playing a leading role in shaping Ukraine's post-war landscape. Now, as the world's superpowers sat down to talk without him, that future looked increasingly bleak. The man who aspired to be a global statesman was reduced to a spectator, watching helplessly as history unfolded without him. But the drama didn't end there. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a move that spoke volumes about the complexity of the situation, declared that Ukraine would not recognise any peace deal that excluded them. It was a stark reminder that in the high-stakes game of international diplomacy, even being at the table doesn't guarantee a voice. As news of the Riyadh talks spread, political commentators began to dissect the implications. Some saw it as a masterful stroke of realpolitik, while others decried it as a betrayal of democratic values. But one thing was clear: Starmer's vision of a NATO-led peacekeeping force in Ukraine now seemed not just naive, but completely out of touch with reality. Starmer's diplomatic disaster has left an indelible mark on his political career, casting a long shadow over the UK's global influence. The consequences of his blunder are reverberating through British politics, with public opinion polls indicating a sharp decline in confidence in his leadership. As Starmer grapples to maintain credibility, the UK's standing on the world stage appears increasingly precarious. The fallout from this debacle has opened the door for emerging political figures to capitalise on Starmer's missteps. With the UK seemingly losing its sway in international affairs, voters are left pondering who might step up to fill the leadership vacuum. The once promising politician now finds himself struggling to articulate a coherent foreign policy vision, leaving many to question whether he can ever regain the trust needed to lead effectively on the global stage. As the dust settles on this diplomatic disaster, it's clear that Starmer's political future hangs in the balance. The coming months will be crucial in determining whether he can recover from this setback, or if his career will be forever defined by this momentous failure. One thing is certain: the repercussions of this incident will continue to shape British politics for years to come.